take your pictures, flash drives away your sorrows. We'll find shows tomorrow, will be a great day to hang out. Even if there are always worries you can't hide, I'm by your side. Let your outfits, uniforms don't define who we are. Let me clean out and shine like the sunshine star. When I try this applause and just how well I'm doing.